Moreover, in Baruch chapter 2, verse 30, in the land of their captivity, they shall remember themselves. So if you study the text, Israelites went into captivity regularly. People try to cite Genesis chapter 9 to make it seem like Canaan was the only one going into captivity. And of course, the Europeans actually did that. And they said, oh, well, these people are Canaanites, talking about anyone who had a dark complexion. And so that's how they essentially justified the transatlantic slave trade and the sub-Saharan slave trade, etc. However, Israelites went into captivity regularly. So yet in those captivities, they would remember the covenant God made with their forefathers. So the pattern is clear. Israelites scattered far away. Israelites would be swallowed up. Israelites would go into captivity, not exile. Then remember themselves. So they like to use that word exile, because it's really soft, but captivity is way aggressive, which is what happened. These captivities that are talked about scripturally, biblically, I mean, you can look at the Assyrian reliefs, man, the Lachish reliefs. Look at them, and they were putting people's heads on stakes. This was not an exile. This was captivity. All of them were. Now, let's add another layer. Captivity, obviously, does not mean just moving people. Captivity talks about renaming people too. In Daniel chapter 1, verse 6 to 7, it says, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. Daniel becomes Belshazzar. Ananiah becomes Shadrach. Mishael becomes Meshach. Azariah becomes Abednego. So we got to be honest. Captivities are not exiles. And exiles are not logically equivalent to being chained and broken down. The brutality of Babylon was not limited to mere human classification or mere human reclassification. It gets deeper. Watch this. In Job chapter 9, verse 24, Job 9:24 says that the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. So Job says that non-Israelites have the earth in their hands, and they are covering faces of the people to whom God ordained to rule in righteousness by means of obscuring their identity. So hiding essentially who holds rightful authority that was ordained by God. I'll give you another example. In the New Testament, in Romans chapter 8, verse 9, and this goes exactly with Job, it says, for the earnest expectation of the creature awaits for the manifestation of the sons of God. So the manifestation of the sons of God, that means that's a revelation that has to take place to reveal who the sons of God are. So obviously when we compare these two, Job chapter 9, verse 24 and Romans chapter 8 together, we see the suppression of the true identity is a tactic of the enemies of God. And then you add the Apocrypha to that, 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 48. They opened the book of the law and sought to paint the likeness of their images. That is cultural overriding or cultural appropriating. So now we have a pattern. We see conquest, we see renaming, we see identity suppression, and then we see cultural appropriation. Now, if someone assumes that Israel, after going through repeated conquest, would remain publicly labeled, perfectly identifiable by the same name and status, how is that even possible in light of all that we've just read? And there is a ton more of these passages. Their assumptions contradict the text. It's just clear. It contradicts the text, people. So I pray you're able to see that. And that contradiction is called a false assumption fallacy. A false assumption happens when someone builds a conclusion on a premise that the text does not support. The text does not say that the Israelites will remain clearly labeled. The text says that they would be scattered, swallowed up, consumed, living among the nations, and then eventually remembering themselves in captivity.